is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft beer and craft chocolate. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional beer writer and an advanced cicerone, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or at her website, annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Hey everyone, welcome to Bean to Barstool Bite Sized, where we spend about 5 minutes with some of our favorite people from craft beer and craft chocolate. Today we hear from Brian Simpson of Riverbend Malt in Asheville, North Carolina. I spoke with Brian all the way back in 2020 for this podcast, but we met up recently for a beer while he was passing through Dayton, and I want to reshare some of his thoughts from that older episode now. Brian shares his thoughts on the meaning of local in craft beer. We prize beers that are brewed locally, but where are the ingredients from? Can a beer be local if it isn't grown locally? Take a few minutes this morning to hear from Brian on what local or regional malt can do for beer.
These brewers are just high-fiving themselves, all over the place for making local beer. And really, there wasn't anything local about it except for the water and their expertise, of course, which is not discounted. But most of the grain was coming from either Canada or overseas. Where's that dollar going? The tourist comes in town, drinks the beer, and then that dollar goes back to Europe or Canada. And we thought, wow, we can maybe do that. So now, just from building that infrastructure, we've got, our grower network that we pay a premium price to, which is important to us. It makes it worthwhile for them to give us good barley, and I think it puts a little money in their pocket. And then we pay the seed cleaner to clean it a lot of the time. And then we pay the shipper to ship it to us. And then we malt it and create jobs here and then send that back out. So look at how many times that $1 kind of gets to spin around in this economy. And then they go out and take our message with them and go to the farmer's market or go to the local stores and buy their food and their beer. And, and there's a story there.
The connection to agriculture, I think, is something that is only just making its way back into craft beer. For the first few decades, I don't feel like consumers had any real awareness of beer as an agricultural product.
You'd be surprised at how many brewers don't really realize that. I think one of your questions was, how do we connect that to the consumer? Their direct connection is to these brewers. They got so much access now. When we started in Asheville, another thing we had in our favor 10 years ago, where there was a big push for farmers markets and local food and artisan approach to things, a little bit slower. And we sort of were thinking about that concept and saying, well, let's be true to it then, let's bring this in. And along the way, I think we've brought a few consumers along with us, but it's sort of drifted, and it has with a lot of brewers, started off real strong here in town, but then there was this big IPA craze, and now it's all about, getting those taps on the wall, man, and some of the message got lost. But the guys that it resonates with, it runs deep, and I think that carries a lot of weight. And if they want to use that as a marketing strategy, i.e. like the craft malt seal or their local intentions and the giving to their community and stuff like that, they want that message to ring true. This is one way they can do it, and they can use that marketing to help them move some beers. Obviously, if I come into town and I want a taste of Dayton or a taste of Asheville, I'm going to walk in and go, what's the most local thing you got in here? And that bartender or that brewer is going to be like, well, here, this is made with actually locally sourced material, hand done here in town and delivered right back to us, and that beer sells pretty quick,
What do you think is lost when consumers or brewers don't keep that connection in mind of the role of agriculture?
You got to be careful here. I don't think that their brewing prowess is lost or their skill set is lost, but there's something about the integrity of what you do that may get lost or maybe misinform your consumer. You're missing an opportunity to take advantage of something very unique that's really only found here There's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere else on the planet that makes a material like I make it, makes a malt like I make it, that sources the ingredients like we do. It'd be like saying, take a super high-end restaurant, that one chef makes a particular item very well, say it's his steak. You can't take that somewhere else and reproduce it, no matter how you try.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that is what is missing, or whether it gets lost. I don't know if it's ever found, with brewers. And it's evident when we go in to do our sales call or just introduce ourselves and talk about beer with these guys, what their interest is in the craft itself. And some of the guys still are just kind of reading the recipe and then backfilling that recipe with whatever comes off the menu from whatever malt producer they're ordering from. And then some of the guys are like true artisans and chefs, where they taste their malt and then build that recipe around it. So I guess I'd twist your question just a little bit and say, I think it's more what can be found in what we do.
You can find out more about Riverbend Malt in the show notes. You can listen to my entire conversation with Brian back in episode 8, all the way back from 2020. I'll share that in the show notes as well. The music today, as always, was by my dear friend Anna P.S. My name is David Nilsson. Thanks for listening to Bean to Barstool Bite Sized.